I've spent more years than I care to count looking into the eyes of men who think they can outsmart the truth. It started back in Chicago during my time on the force. You walk those streets as a cop long enough, and you learn real fast that a lie has a specific sound. It's thin, it's brittle, it's the sound of a man trying to crawl out of a hole he dug himself with his own mouth. I've sat in cramped interrogation rooms with murderers, thieves, and cowards of every stripe. They all have the same look when they realize the walls are closing in. They look for an exit, they look for a scapegoat, or they look for a way to make themselves the victim. I lost my patience for that garbage a long time ago. People ask me why I get so angry on that stage. They think it's for the cameras. They think it's some kind of act I put on when the red light goes on. It's not. It's because I've seen what happens when people look the other way. I've seen the bruises on kids who couldn't speak for themselves. I've seen the broken spirits of mothers who wanted to believe a lie because the truth was just too damn painful to face. When you walk into my studio, you're not walking into a television set. You're walking into a room where the truth is the only thing that matters. I don't care about your excuses. I don't care about your rough childhood. I don't care about how stressed you were or how much you've been drinking. There is no excuse for hurting a child, period. That's the line. You cross it and you deal with me. I've spent my life standing between the predator and the prey, and I'm not about to stop now. If you come on my show and lie to my face about laying a hand on a defenseless toddler, you better be ready for what comes next. Because I don't just see a guest, I see a person who failed the most basic test of humanity. Today was one of those days where the air in the building felt heavy even before the lights went up. I was looking at a file in my dressing room, staring at photos that no person should ever have to see. It was about a guy named Jason, 24 years old. He was a big guy, the kind of guy who clearly spent all his time in the gym, proud of his strength. He was dating a woman named Elena. Elena had a daughter from a previous relationship, a little girl named Mia, just 3 years old. A toddler who should be worried about nothing more than her toys and her cartoons. Instead, she ended up in the emergency room with a fractured arm and bruising on her torso that didn't match any story about falling off a couch. I looked at the medical report, a spiral fracture. You don't get those from a simple trip. You get those when someone grabs an arm and twists it with intent. Jason sat there in the green room, acting like he was the one being persecuted. I could see him on the monitors. He had that arrogant smirk, that I'm the man of the house attitude that usually masks a deep, pathetic cowardice. Elena was a wreck. You could see the conflict tearing her apart. She wanted to believe him. She loved him, or she thought she did, and that's the tragedy of these stories. The person who is supposed to be the gatekeeper, the one who is supposed to protect the child at all costs, is the one who brings the predator into the home. I looked at the photos of Mia again. Her eyes were wide, filled with a fear that no 3-year-old should even know exists. Then I looked at Jason's statement. He claimed it was an accident. He said he was just playing with her, that they were wrestling, and he didn't realize his own strength. I've heard it all before. I've heard I was just playing more times than I can count, and it never results in an ER visit like this. I felt that familiar heat starting in my chest, that tightening in my jaw. By the time I walked out onto that stage, I wasn't just a host. I was a father, I was a veteran, I was a man who was about to tear a liar to pieces. I remember walking past the monitors and seeing him sitting there, adjusting his shirt, looking at himself in the mirror. He wasn't thinking about Mia's pain. He wasn't thinking about the permanent damage he might have caused. He was thinking about how he looked on camera. That tells me everything I need to know about a person's character. If you're accused of hurting a child and your main concern is your hair, you've already lost me. I walked out, the crowd was already buzzing. They knew. They could feel the tension. I sat down and I didn't say a word for a full minute. I just stared at him. I wanted him to feel the weight of the room. I wanted him to see that I wasn't buying the nice guy act for a second. Elena was sitting on the other side, sobbing into a tissue, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I started with her. I asked her, Elena, do you really believe this man? Look at the photos of your daughter. Look at her arm in a cast. Do you honestly believe a 3-year-old's bone just snaps like a twig because of a playing accident? She couldn't even look me in the eye. She whispered that she didn't want to believe he could do it. That's the hook. That's how guys like Jason stay in the house. They use that hope like a weapon. They use the love a woman has for them to shield themselves from the consequences of what they do to our kids. Then I turned to Jason. He tried to give me this firm handshake, trying to play the part of the respectable man. I didn't take it. I just looked at his hand and then back at his face. I told him straight up, I've seen guys like you in 100 different interrogation rooms. You all have the same story. You're all good guys who just had a bad moment. But a bad moment is forgetting to take out the trash. A bad moment isn't breaking a 3-year-old's arm. He tried to interrupt me. He tried to tell me I didn't know the whole story. He told me I wasn't there. He was right. I wasn't there. But the bones don't lie. The bruises don't lie. Medical science doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't care about his excuses. Jason started getting defensive. His voice got louder. His chest puffed out. He started talking about how much he does for the family, how he pays the bills, how he treats Mia like his own. That's the hero defense. They think if they do enough good things, it buys them a pass for the horrific things. It doesn't work that way in my world. You don't get a get-out-of-jail-free card for child abuse just because you bought some groceries. I asked him point blank, did you hit her? Did you grab her arm and twist it because she wouldn't stop crying, because she made a mess? Why did you do it, Jason? He looked me dead in the eye and said, Steve, I swear on my life, I would never hurt that girl. I love her. He said it with such conviction that for a split second, you could hear a pin drop in that studio. He was a good liar. He'd practiced. He probably said it to Elena 1,000 times until she started to believe it herself. But I wasn't Elena. I've spent 20 years listening to the tone of a lie, and his was vibrating at a frequency I knew all too well. I leaned in closer. I wanted to be in his personal space. I wanted him to feel the pressure. You're a big guy, Jason, I said. You look like you could bench press a small car. And you're telling me that you were playing with a 30-pound toddler and you accidentally applied enough torque to snap her humerus? Do you know how much force that takes? That's not a trip and fall. That's a violent act. He started stuttering then. The smirk began to fade. He started talking about how Mia is difficult sometimes. There it was, the shift, the first sign of the victim blaming. He was starting to lay the groundwork for why she deserved it, or why it was her fault for being difficult. It's the oldest trick in the book for abusers. They make the victim the provocateur. I didn't let him finish the sentence. I told him to shut his mouth. I told him that a 3-year-old can't be difficult enough to justify a fractured bone. Elena started crying harder, and I could see the realization starting to dawn on her. She was hearing him make excuses for the first time in public, and it sounded a lot different under the studio lights than it did in their living room. We were getting close to the truth. I could feel it. The air was thick with it. Jason was sweating now, despite the air conditioning. He kept shifting in his seat, his eyes darting around the room. He was looking for an out, but there were no outs left. We had the polygraph results sitting right there on the table. And in my experience, the truth doesn't just come out, it explodes. I watched the way he was breathing. That shallow, rapid chest movement that happens when the body's fight or flight response kicks in, but there's nowhere to run and no one he can fight without ending up in handcuffs. I've seen that look in eyes of guys twice his size, guys who thought they were the toughest thing on the block until they were sitting in an 8x8 room with a detective who knew they were full of it. Jason was trying to maintain that tough guy exterior, but the cracks were turning into canyons. He kept looking at Elena, trying to find some shred of sympathy in her eyes, trying to manipulate her one last time before the hammer came down. I knew what he was doing. He was trying to signal to her that they were a team, that it was us against the world and us against Steve. That's a classic abuser move, isolate the partner from anyone who's actually trying to help. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I leaned back for a second just to let the silence sit there. Silence is a weapon. Most people can't handle it. They start talking just to fill the space, and that's when they slip up. That's when the truth starts to leak out around the edges of the lie. I looked down at the yellow envelope sitting on the arm of my chair. To Jason, that envelope was a death warrant for his reputation. To me, it was justice for a little girl who was currently sitting at home with a heavy plaster cast on her arm because the man her mother trusted couldn't control his temper. I thought about Mia. I thought about the fear she must have felt when he grabbed her. A 3-year-old doesn't understand why the person who is supposed to be a daddy figure is suddenly a monster. They don't understand the physics of a spiral fracture. They just know the pain and the betrayal. That's what people like Jason never seem to grasp. They think they're the ones suffering because they have to answer some tough questions on a stage. They have no concept of the trauma they leave behind in a child's mind. That trauma doesn't just go away when the bone heals. It stays there. It changes the way they look at the world. It makes them think that love and pain are the same thing. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let some guy sit on my stage and act like he's the victim while that little girl is the one carrying the real weight. I picked up the envelope and tapped it against my palm. I could see Jason's eyes follow it like a hawk. He was terrified. He should have been. Told him, Jason, we have a very experienced polygraph examiner. He doesn't have an axe to grind. He doesn't know you. He doesn't care if you stay with Elena or if you go to jail. He just looks at the charts. He looks at the heart rate, the sweat, the respiration. He looks at how your body reacts when you're forced to tell the truth or when you choose to lie. And let me tell you, the human body is a terrible liar. You can train your face to look calm. You can practice your words in the mirror, but you can't tell your heart not to race when you're caught. He tried to play it off. He said the machine was rigged or that he was just nervous because I was yelling at him. That's the standard line. I'm just nervous. I told him, I'm nervous when I'm running late for work, Jason. I don't fail a polygraph about child abuse because I'm nervous. You fail because you're guilty. I opened the envelope slowly. I wanted him to feel every second of it. I looked at the results, though I already knew what they were going to say. I've been doing this long enough to know the result before I even see the paper. You can see it in the way a man sits. A man who is innocent has a different kind of energy. He's angry, sure, but it's a clean anger. It's a how dare you accuse me kind of anger. Jason's anger was dirty. It was defensive. It was the anger of a cornered animal. I looked at the first question. Jason, did you intentionally cause those injuries to Mia? I looked at him. He was staring at me, his face pale, his jaw set. I read it again, louder this time. Did you intentionally cause those injuries to Mia? You said no. The polygraph determined that was a lie. The audience erupted. It was like a wave of heat hitting the stage. Elena let out a sound, a sob that sounded like her heart was literally breaking in her chest. She put her head in her hands and just collapsed into herself. Jason didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just sat there staring at me with those cold, arrogant eyes. The machine is wrong, he whispered. I didn't let him off the hook. I went to the next one. Did you grab Mia by the arm and twist it because you were angry? He had said no to that one too. I looked him dead in the eye and said, that was also a lie. You didn't just play with her. You didn't accidentally hurt her. You grabbed a 3-year-old child and you twisted her arm until it snapped. You heard it pop, didn't you, Jason? You heard her scream and you didn't call for help right away, did you? He started to get up, his face turning a dark, ugly shade of red. He started shouting, calling the examiner a liar, calling me a liar, calling the whole show a setup. He was spiraling. The mask was gone. The nice guy who loved Mia was nowhere to be found. In his place was the man who broke her arm. I stood up too. I don't let people stand over me, especially not people like him. I got right in his face. I could smell the stale coffee and the fear on him. Don't you dare stand up and yell in my house, I told him, my voice low and steady. That's when they usually realize they've lost. When I stop yelling and start talking quiet, that's when the real danger starts for them. You sat there and lied to that woman. You sat there and watched her cry, watched her doubt herself, watched her defend you to her own family, all while you knew exactly what you did to her daughter. You're not a man. You're a coward. You're the lowest form of life I deal with on this show. He tried to move toward Elena, maybe to try and talk her back into his corner, but I stepped right in between them. I'm not letting him near her. Not anymore. The truth was out now. It was like the air had been cleared of a poison. Elena looked up at him, and for the first time, I didn't see love or doubt in her eyes. I saw pure, unadulterated disgust. That's the moment the cycle breaks. When the mother finally sees the monster for what he is, the monster loses his power. Jason realized it too. He looked around the room, seeing 100 faces, looking at him with the same expression I had. He had nowhere left to hide. The lie was dead, and he was standing over the corpse of it with the whole world watching. He looked like he wanted a bolt. I've seen that shift in body language 1,000 times. The shoulders hunch, the eyes start darting toward the exits, and the feet start pivoting. It's the instinct of a guilty man who just realized the floor he's been standing on is actually a trap door. But I wasn't done with him, not by a long shot. You don't get to break a child's arm, lie to my face, and then just walk away because the truth got a little too uncomfortable for you. I stepped into his line of sight, blocking his path to the side of the stage. I wanted him to stay right there in the center of that circle of light. I wanted him to feel the eyes of every person in that room and every person watching at home. This wasn't about TV drama. This was about the fact that a little girl was suffering because of the man standing in front of me. Sit back down, Jason, I said. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. He hesitated, his chest still heaving, looking like he might try to push past me. I've dealt with bigger and meaner than him in the alleys of Chicago. A gym rat bully wasn't going to intimidate me. He saw that I wasn't moving, and he slowly sank back into the chair, though he looked like he was sitting on a bed of nails. I turned to Elena. She was shaking, her hands over her mouth, staring at him like he was a stranger, and in a way, he was. The man she thought she loved, the man she let into her home and around her daughter, didn't exist. He was a mask. The person sitting there now, the one who failed those questions, that was the real Jason. I leaned down so I was at eye level with her. Elena, look at me, I said, keeping my voice low but firm. You heard the results. This isn't my opinion. This isn't a guess. He lied about intentionally hurting Mia. He lied about twisting her arm. You've been living with a man who could look you in the eye every day, watch you worry about your daughter's recovery, and keep that secret hidden inside him. What does that tell you about him? She looked at Jason, her voice cracking. How could you? You told me you were just playing. You told me she tripped on a rug. I defended you to my mother. I told the social worker you were a good man. That's the part that hurts the most for the victims. It's the guilt of having defended the person who was hurting their child. I told her, Elena, don't take his guilt onto your shoulders. He's the one who did this. He's the one who manipulated you. But now you know. And now you have to decide what kind of mother you're going to be, because if he stays in that house, you're telling Mia that her pain doesn't matter. You're telling her that his temper is more important than her safety. Jason erupted again. She's lying. The test is wrong. I'm telling you, I didn't do it. He started hitting the arm of the chair. I turned back to him, and this time, I didn't hold back the volume. Stop it. Stop the lying. You failed every significant question on that test. You didn't just fail because you were stressed. You showed clear physiological deception when asked if you grabbed that girl's arm and twisted it. Do you know why you failed? Because your own body knows you're a liar. You could tell yourself whatever story helps you sleep at night. You could tell yourself it was an accident or she provoked you. But the truth is written in your blood pressure and your heart rate. You are a child abuser, Jason. Own it. He looked at me with this pathetic, watery-eyed expression, trying to shift back into the victim role. I have a lot of stress, Steve. Work has been hard, and the house is always loud, and she wouldn't stop screaming. I didn't mean to hurt her that bad. There it was, the partial confession. It's what they do when they realize the total lie isn't working anymore. They give you a little piece of the truth to try and buy some sympathy. I didn't mean to hurt her that bad. I seized on that. So you did mean to hurt her? Just not enough to break the bone? Is that what you're telling me? That you intended to cause her pain, but you just overplayed your hand? He realized he'd slipped up and tried to pull it back, but it was too late. The words were out there. The admission of intent was hanging in the air like a shroud. I looked at the audience. I could see mothers in the front row with tears in their eyes. I could see men with their fists clenched. Everyone in that room knew exactly what happened in that house when the doors were closed and no one was watching. Jason had lost his cool. He had taken his frustrations out on a 3-year-old who couldn't fight back. He had grabbed that small, fragile arm and used his adult strength to inflict pain. And the most disgusting part wasn't even the act itself. It was the weeks of lying afterward. It was watching Mia cry in her cast and pretending he was the one comforting her. I've seen a lot of things, but the betrayal of a child's trust is something I will never get used to. A child is supposed to look at the adults in their life as protectors. To Mia, Jason wasn't just some guy. He was a person her mother told her to trust. When he reached for her, she probably didn't run at first. She probably thought he was going to pick her up or play. And then the pain came. The betrayal came. That's a scar that doesn't show up on an x-ray, but it's there. It's deep. I stood in front of Jason, looming over him. You're a coward, I told him. You're a big, strong guy who picks on people who can't fight back. You think you're tough? Try picking on someone your own size. Try picking on me. But you wouldn't do that, would you? Because you only have accidents with toddlers. He didn't have anything left to say. He just stared at the floor, his face twisted in a mixture of anger and shame. But I didn't see any real remorse. I didn't see a man who was sorry for what he did to Mia. I saw a man who was sorry he got caught. I saw a man who was mad that his comfortable life with Elena was over. I turned back to the envelope. There was one more question. Did you ever hurt Mia before this incident? The result was inconclusive, but on my show, and with a guy like this, we all knew what that meant. He hadn't been honest about the history of the relationship either. This wasn't a one-time bad moment. This was a pattern. This was a lifestyle of intimidation and violence that had finally escalated to a point where it couldn't be ignored. I told Elena, this wasn't the first time, was it? Think back, the random bruises, the way she would shy away when he walked into the room. You saw the signs, didn't you? Elena started nodding slowly, the memories clearly flooding back. She had seen it, but she had let him talk her out of her own intuition. That's what these guys do. They make you feel crazy for noticing the truth. I felt the cold, hard anger. This is the moment where the host part of me ends and the cop part takes over. I wanted him out of my sight, but more importantly, I wanted him out of that little girl's life forever. I looked at the security guards off stage. They were ready. They knew how these things ended. I looked back at Jason, who was now trying to hide his face from the cameras. You don't get to hide now, I said. The whole world sees you for exactly what you are. I looked at him, and I didn't see a man. I saw a void. I saw a person who had completely detached himself from the reality of his actions. To Jason, Mia wasn't a human being with feelings and a future. She was an obstacle to his comfort, a noise that needed to be silenced, a difficult situation that he dealt with, using his fist and his fury. I've seen this sociopathic detachment before. It's the same look I'd seen in the back of a squad car when a guy would tell me he didn't know how the drugs got in his pocket or how the blood got on his shirt. They live in a world where things just happen to them, where they are never the architects of their own disaster. I stood there and I felt the collective weight of the audience's disgust. It was palpable. It was a physical force in the room. I turned my attention back to Lena because she was the only one in this equation who could actually change the outcome for that little girl. Elena, I said, my voice echoing in the sudden silence of the studio. You have a choice to make right now. And I'm going to tell you something that might be hard to hear, but you need to hear it. You are her mother. You are the only person on this planet whose sole job is to keep her safe. You failed her when you let this man stay in your house after she came home from the hospital. You failed her every time you listened to his lies and ignored your own gut instinct. But that ends today. You can't change what happened to her arm, but you can change what happens to the rest of her life. If you walk out of here with him, if you let him back into that house, you are an accomplice to whatever he does next. And believe me, there will be a next time. It always gets worse. It never, ever gets better. She was sobbing, her whole body racking with the weight of that realization. She looked at Jason, and he had the audacity to try and reach for her hand. He actually tried to play the I need you card. I stepped in and knocked his hand away. Don't you touch her, I growled. You lost the right to touch anyone in that family the second you put your hands on that baby. You think you're so tough, Jason? You think you're a big man because you can overpower a toddler? You're nothing. You're a stain. You're the kind of person I spent 20 years putting behind bars, and if it were up to me, you'd be walking out of here in handcuffs right now. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flash of that true, ugly temper. His eyes narrowed, and he balled his fists. He wanted to swing. I could see it in the way his jaw muscles were pulsing. I didn't move an inch. I wanted him to try. I wanted him to show everyone exactly who he was when he wasn't being coddled. Go ahead, I challenged him. Show the world what you do when you don't get your way. Show them the guy who broke me his arm. He blinked, and the bravado crumbled. He knew he couldn't win here. He knew the cameras were catching every second of his cowardice. He slumped back, defeated by the truth he couldn't outrun anymore. I picked up the polygraph results one last time and held them up so the camera could see them, so the people in the back row could see them. These results don't lie. People lie, abusers lie, cowards lie. But the truth is right here. Jason, you are a liar, you are a child abuser, and you are no longer welcome on my stage. I pointed toward the exit. Usually, this is where the guest tries to make one last stand, one last F you to the audience or to me. But Jason just looked hollow. He stood up slowly, the weight of the entire room pressing down on him. As he started to walk off, the audience didn't just boo, they rose up. It was a wall of noise, a wall of righteous anger. He had to walk through that gauntlet of shame. I watched him go, making sure he didn't try to turn back toward Elena. I watched until the heavy studio door swung shut behind him, cutting him off from the people he had spent months manipulating. The silence that followed was even heavier than the noise. I sat down next to Elena. I didn't talk to her as a host anymore. I talked to her as a guy who has seen too many Mayas in his life. He's gone, Elena, I said. He's out of your life. We're going to get you help. We're going to get you counseling, and we're going to make sure that social services knows exactly what happened here today so that he can never, ever be near your daughter again. But you have to stay strong. You have to be the wall between him and her. Do you understand? She nodded, her face wet with tears, but there was a different look in her eyes now. The fog of his manipulation was starting to lift. She looked like a woman who had just woken up from a nightmare, only to realize she was still in the middle of the wreckage. I stood up and looked directly into the camera. I wanted to talk to the people sitting at home, the people who might be living in a similar situation. If you're watching this and you're wondering if that accident was really an accident, if you're making excuses for a man who is supposed to love you but is hurting your children, look at Elena. Look at the pain in her eyes. Don't wait for a broken bone. Don't wait for something worse. Trust your gut. Your children don't have a voice. You are their voice. If you don't protect them, who will? I felt the exhaustion of the day starting to hit me. It's a drain dealing with this kind of evil. It takes a piece of you every time. People think I love the shouting, but what I'd love is a day where I don't have to shout because there are no more Jasons in the world. But until that day comes, I'm going to keep standing here. I'm going to keep reading those results. And I'm going to keep calling out the cowards who think they can hide behind a smile while they destroy a child's life. I walked off the stage as the credits started to roll, but I didn't go to my dressing room. I went to the wings and watched Elena as the producers gathered around her to get her to the support she needed. She looked small, but she looked free. That's the only victory we get in this business. We don't fix everything. We can't take away the trauma, but we can stop the bleeding. We can pull the predator out of the house. I leaned against the wall and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the image of that little girl's x-ray. It's hard to leave it at the office when the office is a battlefield for the truth. You carry it with you. You carry the anger and the sadness, and you use it as fuel for the next one, because there's always a next one. There's always another liar waiting in the green room, thinking they're the one who's going to beat the box, and I'll be there waiting for them. The studio lights eventually go down, and the crew starts moving the chairs, clearing the stage for the next story, the next crisis. But the energy of what happened with Jason and Elena stays in the air. It's a bitter taste. I sat in my dressing room for a long time afterward, just staring at the wall, the silence finally replacing the shouting. People think the show ends when the cameras stop, but for me, these stories don't have a neat wrap. They follow me out the door. I think about Mia. I think about her growing up and eventually learning the truth about what happened on this stage today. I hope she knows that there were people who stood up for her when she couldn't. I hope she grows up in a house where she never has to flinch when someone raises their hand, where the sound of a footstep in the hallway doesn't make her heart race with terror. That's why I do this. It isn't for the ratings. It's for the one child who gets a chance at a normal life because a monster was finally unmasked and removed from her world. The truth is a heavy thing to carry, but lies are far heavier. They crush families. They destroy souls. If you see something, say something. Don't let a child suffer because you're afraid of the conflict. Be the person who stands up. Because if we don't protect the children, then who the hell are we? Keep your kids safe. That's the only job that really matters.